better future is built by the brave, envisioned by brilliant minds, born from the passions of thousands strong. One that isn't without risk, but protected from it. Safe from all the worries and secure for what's to come. Because a better future with the greatest empires, the strongest communities, and the happiest families will always be worth having. That's why the bold and the fearless understand that recreating something better takes courage and strength. So together, let's start shaping a better future today. Recreate a braver tomorrow.
All right. Hello and welcome everyone to the first session of the sustainability series of BusinessWorld Insights. I'm Leo Uy and I'll be moderating for this episode titled The Philippine Sustainability State and COVID-19. So the COVID-19 induced economic and health crisis has undermined the prospects of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, which, by the way, was already said to be off track by the end of 2019, according to a United Nations report published last July. In times like these, it may seem like an easy choice to deprioritize sustainability-related initiatives as firms focus on trying to survive. But is this considered the optimal choice? Join us today as we discuss the issues surrounding sustainability amid the new normal. Before we start, again, there's going to be a Q&A portion later. So if you have any questions from the audience, I encourage everyone to drop it in the comment section so that we can direct some of them to our esteemed panelists later on. Now that said, let me introduce everyone to today's speakers. So first up, we have Enrico Gaveglia, who is Deputy Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP in the Philippines. Enrico has worked for UNDP for over 15 years in several capacities across regions. Between 2010 and 2016, he has been Deputy Country Director for the organization in Sri Lanka and Cambodia and has joined the Manila UNDP team in mid-July 2016. Between 2005 and 2010, he was the head of the Trust Fund Management Unit in UNDP Sudan. He is an active resource person for UNDP headquarters in the management consulting team, Surge for crisis response, and an advisor for the setup of multi-partner trust funds. Thank you for joining us, Enrico. You now have the floor for your opening statement.
Good morning, and thanks a lot, colleagues and participants today. So let me start with the maybe some reflection on the Agenda 2030 that you introduced right now. When world leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in 2015, they committed to a shared vision to set the world on a sustainable path for people, planet, peace, partnership, prosperity. Almost 1/3 of the way into the journey at the SDG Summit held in New York in September 2019, when member states recognized that global efforts were coming up short to deliver that transformational shift by 2030. Renewed international commitment is needed to fulfill the promise to present and future generations. The year 2020 kickstarted with a decade of action, a reaffirmation of the global commitment through accelerated efforts and sustainable solutions to the world's biggest challenges, ranging from eradicating poverty and reducing gender inequality to addressing climate change. Yet, in only a brief period of time, the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted efforts to achieve the 2030 agenda. The global community finds itself in an unprecedented situation where parallel threats of health, economic, and social crises left countries struggling to contain the epidemic and provide immediate financial relief for the many people affected by the associated macroeconomic downturns. The pandemic threatens to reverse years of progress on poverty, hunger, health care, and education. While the virus has impacted everyone, it has affected the world's poorest and most vulnerable people the most. Before COVID-19, we were struggling with issues like the number of persons suffering from hunger and food insecurity was on the rise. Climate change was occurring much more quickly than anticipated. Environment was deteriorating. Inequality continued to increase within and among countries. It is important to know that the outset, the COVID-19 crisis is set to be a prolonged one. One of the antonyms of the word crisis is certainty, and is very well understood 8 months into the crisis that COVID-19 is here to stay. The effects of the pandemic and the measures taken to mitigate its impact have overwhelmed health system globally, kept up 90% of students out of school, caused business and factories to shut down, disrupted global value chain and supply of products, and is expected to push 71 million people back into extreme poverty and cause 132 million more people to suffer from undernourishment in 2020. In 2020, as per the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the world faces the worst economic recession since the Great Depression, with a 4.2% expected decline in real GDP per capita. World trade is expected to plunge by 13 to 32%. The most vulnerable countries will be far worse off. It is estimated that foreign direct investment could decline by up to 40%, and remittance to low and middle income countries are likely to fall by 20% in 2020. We were talking about SDG regression just when we were working on SDG acceleration, and on SDG regression equals a human development regression. In the Philippines, a recent study by UNDP revealed that 86% of Filipinos' households experience a loss of income due to the lockdown, with over 54% losing half or more of the source of livelihoods. We found that the record high 30.7% on estimated 7.6 million families experiencing voluntary hunger at least once in the last 3 months, while UNDP data shows that 56% of families are becoming more and more food insecure. All this given, the pandemic gives us now an opportunity to rethink how we are living in and create more sustainable pathways to recovery. Many countries are embarking on a great reset, taking the painful lesson from COVID-19 to rebuild greener economies, promote greater collaboration between governments, private sector. Companies should rethink their strategy and contribute in their own way to generating green jobs and create more circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Enrico, for your opening statement. So next, we have Director Senen Perlada, who leads the Export Marketing Bureau of the Department of Trade and Industry. The Bureau is a focal export marketing agency for DTI in providing enabling services to the Philippine exporting community through business intelligence and strategic knowledge management supportive of product and market diversification. Director Perlada is concurrently the Executive Director of the Export Development Council. He has more than 20 years of international marketing experience and business development work in the private sector, having held various senior management positions in a number of Filipino and internationally engaged firms. Thank you for joining us, Senen. You now have the floor. Sir? Sir, are you there?
Okay. Yes, thank you very much, Leo. Sorry, I was muted. So I need some help to be able to do this presentation. So if you don't mind, I'll share my slides, and I hope
sir,
it will come out.
Sir,
Yes.
before you proceed, can you please turn on your mic? I think it's disabled.
My mic is disabled.
Sorry, your camera.
My camera. Okay.
Right.
All right.
There you go.
I'm good. I'm good now. Okay. So yeah, let me share my slide. I hope I can do it, or probably wait. I can't find my. Wait. There you go. Okay. Well, it says Streamline is StreamYard is already sharing my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir. We can see that.
Okay. Let me just. Okay. Is that okay now?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much. So thank you, Leo. Again, well, as Enrico has mentioned, the global economy has really been badly hurt by COVID-19. The global economy is expected to enter its worst recession since the 1930s, impacting every sector from hospitality to education to finance. And businesses face huge challenges navigating through the turbulence, coping with disrupted supply chains, as already mentioned, and rapidly, and this is more important for us people in marketing, rapidly changing consumer buying behavior. Consumers now struggle with the spread of the virus, the lockdowns, and the new daily regimes. They also face rising unemployment and deteriorating earnings, and more households are expected to fall into the lower income brackets. Overall, a growing anxiety about future prospects are undermining global consumer sentiment. Now, my perspective is from trade. So this is really going to pose a big challenge for us because of the massive changes caused by the pandemic. It makes consumers reevaluate their life priorities, giving rise to new values and spending patterns. Behavioral shifts such as focus on family, community, health, and digital solutions are expected to be enduring as part of what I would call the next new normal. So what do we face here? These are the sustainability forces of change that we can see. We've already polluted our world so much, and I think it took the global, the pandemic to make us realize how badly we are doing as consumers. So there's corporate involvement, there is government action, and then we can see here, of course, consumer demand. Now, you've already seen these very familiar global goals of 17 SDGs that Enrico has already tackled a bit. So these are the forces of change that will actually influence what's going to happen in the next new normal. This is a slide, I guess, that is very, very familiar to everyone. You can see the V-shaped plunge in 2020, and then it is hoped really that by 2021 that there will be a bounce back. It's transformed the economic landscape worldwide, but we really don't know what's going to happen next because we're still right in the middle of it. How has it in fact affected our merchandise exports? Because I'm talking from the purview of trade. It basically follows the same trend or pattern, but you can see here that the Philippine merchandise exports dipped to its lowest level at almost 50% in April and started to go back, okay, until we were hit again by the new lockdowns that were imposed in August. So you can see here from the trend that was supposed to be going up already, we're back down here in August 2020. I'd like to talk a little bit about how important MSMEs are, particularly SMEs are in the case of exports. And you can see here from the World Trade Organization data. This is a bit dated in 2012. Look at the share of SMEs in agriculture, forestry and fishing, accommodation and food services, arts, entertainment and recreation, and of course, wholesale and retail trade and repair. You can see in blue the kind of impact that the pandemic has done or will do in the case of SMEs, most of which are, in the case of the Philippines, are our exporters. Government response to support MSMEs, this is already fast forward to July. You will see that governments have responded with liquidity measures, trade support measures, resilience-focused measures, as well as measures to improve the business environment. Now let's focus on trade support measures. Trade-related measures to support MSMEs. By July 2020, you can see here the reduction in trade-related payments, for example, tariffs for essential products and freight, deferral of trade-related payments and customs, duties, export loan principal, streamlined customs procedures for essential products, trade loans, financial support to MSMEs, quicker payment of trade-related funds, market access support, including e-commerce sales support, and I'll go a little bit on that later on, market information, standard support, trade-related grants, export insurance, and transport support, for example, state-backed transport services. In the long term, or for the long term, governments have responded with financial support for innovation, financial support for the adoption of digital technologies, and again, more on this later, financial support for skills development, for diversification of supply chains, and for green energy production. Sustainability in times of COVID, what's the impact on consumers? With the exception of home care, tissue and hygiene, food and hot drinks, as you can see in this slide, COVID-19 will unsurprisingly have a negative impact on consumer markets. That's something that we have to be very concerned about for us in the trade sector. In the case of impact on businesses, the pandemic has redefined sustainability with social awareness. So you can see pre-COVID-19, just last year, the sustainability meaning for business has actually changed. Reducing impact on the environment, of course, it's still there. And then you will see on the right side, achieving the SDGs, which has now become part of the sustainability meaning for business. And then you will see they're also supporting local communities. So you can see on the right, the kind of changes, or shall we say some tweaking that has happened in terms of the definition of sustainability for business. What's important here is for example, being a purpose-driven business. As Enrico has mentioned, we all have to kind of reflect really, both individually and collectively, our purpose in life, I guess, no? Now, businesses are now compelled to rethink social issues. And these are based on the surveys of Euromonitor. Company says that their company is supporting local communities. A lot of companies are now going hyper-local. My company is supporting suppliers and other business partners and supporting employees. Now, for us in the export trade, of course, this is a bit of a concern because, what about those products and services that we sell abroad if we will continue to go being purely hyper-local? You see here the most important sustainability issues for business is promotion of the environment, promotion of social and community well-being, good governance, and internal policies for reporting and accountability. SDGs remain key now to corporate sustainability. You will see here that in that survey, how does your company prioritize sustainability strategies? UN sustainability environmental goals are already now number 3 after their own internal metrics and how their business practices are directly impacting the environment or community. But the pandemic is affecting sustainable development. Obviously, you see here engagement with sustainable with SDGs. Despite the 12.1 different here, the reality is that most companies basically stopped and had suspended animation on their efforts towards really meeting the SDG goals. That's the sad part about it. Green recovery gains momentum across the world, and we even in DTI have done this. Distribution of NTMs that directly address SDGs by goal. You will see here, actually, the pandemic is promoting, and I'm sad to say, the non-tariff measures, no? But I guess for good reason now. So instead of looking at them at non-tariff measures, I guess we can look at the UN SDG goals as more of being trade facilitating goals, actually. So almost half in APEC region and globally directly and positively addresses SDGs such as Goal 3, Goal 12 for responsible consumption and production, and highlighting the need for international collaboration to achieve SDGs. We in the DTI have already even pre-COVID have already been working on this. We've already crafted a pathway to doing green business, starting from starting a business to leveling up to export awareness, readiness, market readiness, entry, and to all the way to export sustainability and export expansion. So you will see here the different functional groups of the DTI and the kind of activities that they are to undertake in order for us to meet this export pathways for green exports. Actually, the NTMs being experienced by companies now that are involved in international trade have been there before, but it has become more pronounced because of the global pandemic. These NTMs and their associated procedural obstacles, of course, increasingly make significant components or become significant components of trade costs. So we are very much concerned about this, especially in the case of the Asia-Pacific region, where 15.3% of those costs are even higher than those in the United States and even the European Union. And in the agricultural and automotive sectors, the combined cost of non-tariff measures are up to all the way up to 20% of imports. So my key takeaways, and please take this as my personal takeaways. One, the next new normal in the global economy is digital. It is going to be green and circular. And all our exporters must prepare for this. The second, the movement of social, economic, and environmental sustainability is destined to keep growing. I don't think this is going to stop. Even if at this moment we're kind of in suspended animation, I think for businesses, they realize that in order to thrive, they must embrace this movement or face extinction. Third and last, we all have a responsibility to ensure that future generations will be able to inherit a livable planet. With that, I'd like to thank you for my opening statement. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that, Director, for your opening statement. Finally, we have Timothy Daniels of SM Investments Corp. So Tim is a full-time investor relations representative for SMIC, the largest listed company in the Philippines, with market-leading businesses in retail, banking, and property, and investments in high-growth ventures that capture the potential of the emerging Philippine economy. He is responsible for engaging with institutional investors and financial analysts globally, and for supporting and developing the IR capabilities of companies within the SM Group. He also supports the SM Group sustainability function, responsible for the sustainability reporting of 8 companies, building SM's group-wide sustainability capabilities, and helping drive key ESG initiatives. Good day, Tim. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to talk today.
Yes, sir.
I also would like to start using my 5 minutes with a short presentation. Give me a second while I try and call this up.
All right, go ahead.
How's that? Can you see my slides?
No, sir. I think it's loading now. Yes. There you go.
Yes, okay. So, with the topic of this whole discussion today being around sustainability and what it means during the COVID period, I thought maybe I'd use my 5 minutes just to set some context about, how SM thinks about both and some of the actions that we've taken as, one of the private sector groups that's trying to be responsible and react to this situation appropriately. We're not unique in doing this, but I thought I would share, SM's thinking. And the whole approach really starts with the way the group has grown over the last 6 decades, because, it's the founder, Henry C., who had a belief that business growth and social development actually go hand in hand. And that ends up being reflected in what you will read as the vision of the group on page 1 of, when you read our annual report, our sustainability report, which is that, to grow world-class businesses, what we need to be is a catalyst for development in the communities that we serve. And the reason I point these out is because this gets you into the space of very long-term thinking, and it gets you into the space of thinking about shared value. SM is a large group, but we're really an ecosystem of many, many small businesses and MSMEs and many stakeholders. And so our sustainability thinking is about, how do we make everybody win in this going forward, and how do we think very long term? And we've been through a kind of journey about transparency and realizing we need to disclose more to meet people's expectations about this in the last 5 years or so. As you mentioned, we now have 8 sustainability reports that we publish, and every year our journey helps us to improve their scope and the quality of what we're producing. Last year, we had a significant moment because we signed up for the United Nations Global Compact. And we did that recognizing the importance of the Sustainability Development Goals and our responsibility given the size that we have as a player, in the Philippines. So the 17 goals, which I think we're all familiar with, when we started reporting on it, we realized that the breadth of our group meant that we had a lot to talk about under every single one. But it didn't feel like that was the right approach to prioritizing our sustainability efforts. So we narrowed down to 6 of them, which are critical to us. And these are the ones that we selected because, first of all, we spoke to all of our stakeholders, what they thought was important. But then we really assessed, what is our business doing and what's it capable of doing? i.e., where can we really make the most material difference in the Philippines to the communities and the stakeholders that we work with? And we settled on these 6. And they reflect really, the activity and the footprint that we have. So, number 8, with decent work and economic growth, SM employs around 160,000 people, directly or indirectly. And talking about MSMEs, between our retail suppliers, our mall tenants, the customers of the bank who are funding their businesses to grow, and some of the partners and recipients of our foundation, just within those core parts of the group, we already have relationships and we work with over 80,000 micro, small, and medium enterprises. So focusing on number 8 is clearly important to us. And very aligned again with our core business is number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Because along with our goals and our vision, we can really help transform underdeveloped areas into thriving communities. And I would point to something like the Mall of Asia complex as an example, where we bring modern infrastructure and mixed use in all its forms. And in a place like the Philippines, we need to do that in a very disaster resilient way, which is why SM invests 10% of all of its capex in the property business directly into features which create disaster resilience and preparedness, given what can happen here, given our geographic location. Climate action, we all know about climate change. This is the giant wave of things that we're going to have to focus on once we get through this pandemic and through the economical situation we're at. This big one is going to hit the Philippines far more heavily than most other countries. And so, our actions here fall into looking at ourselves, our business practices, our efficient resource use, and how we can work with our partners to give green choices to customers. But it's also around how we can help finance renewable energy, where BDO has been a leader in renewable energy financing and has provided over 44 billion pesos in financing to renewable energy projects across the Philippines. Now, number 3 and number 4, health and well-being and education, they come out of what has long been our CSR activities, but we realize that using our footprint and our assets as well as our financial strength, we can really make a difference in some key areas that the Philippine social development needs. So, we build hospitals and outpatient centers, which have benefited almost 9 million patients to date. We've funded 64,000 students through the schools that we operate. 64,000 students have benefited, and we've got almost 10,000 scholars who've gone on to higher education through SM's programs. And when you get to the micro level, we've actually trained 27,000 farmers in the country in how to improve their farming practices to help them get further up the ladder of their own economic development, and at the same time being able to try and feed them into our ecosystem of suppliers for our own supermarkets and chains across the country. And then finally, 17, partnership for goals. This is the one that's really come alive for us in the last few years as we've reflected on just the size of the footprint that we can have and how important it is for the private sector to be advocates for all the elements of sustainability. So, apart from joining the Global Compact, We've been leading through SM Prime with UN Arise, an organization for disaster resilience. We've been participating in the Carbon Disclosure Project. We work with GRI, and we try to do as many things like this as we can, where we just stake out why we think it's important and advocate that other corporates think along the same lines with sustainability embedded in their businesses. So that's the general way we think about sustainability. But obviously this year, the S part of ESG, the social component, has taken on huge significance. Not that the environmental and the governance practices aren't incredibly relevant as well, but all of our stakeholders have needed much more effort in that S category, the social responsibilities that we have. And so, what we've done is we've tried to really use our assets, our capabilities, and where necessary, our balance sheet to deal with making all of our stakeholders get through this. So for our employees, it's been, not only assistance and regular testing, it's been making sure that all of our corporate facilities and offices are constantly kept sanitized and clean and safe places to work. We've adapted to working from home. In many cases, we've given our frontliners, hazard pay and extra safety work and benefits. For the partners that we work with, we've focused on helping them get access to market, but also recognizing the financial difficulties they've had, where BDO has been very active through this with loan programs and utilizing MSMEs as points of basic transactions, for retail customers. And within our mall business, we've been as supportive as we can be with our tenants, most of whom are actually SMEs. And just even at the half year in our reported numbers, we've provided over 11 billion of relief to those tenant partners, and we continue to work with them to help them make their businesses survive through this pandemic, so that we can carry on all working, once we get through this together. In terms of our customers and our communities, who are our other important stakeholders, their safety has been primary importance as well. And I think anyone who's been to an SM mall recently will see the extent of the no mask, no entry, and the cleanliness and social distancing and things we've done to make safe malling at SM. But also during this period, we've really realized it's not just safety, it's convenience that customers need, because the lack of freedom of movement has created a lot of difficulties for them. So we've had an intense period of innovation with click and collect ways of shopping, online shopping, concierge shopping, pickup points in malls, use of social media to reach out to our customers. And that's been very heavily adopted within our retail business in particular. And then purely on the trying to help our community side, we have a lot of assets and we have financial strength because we have decades of financial prudence. So we've been able to turn many of our assets to good community use. For example, the SM Arena was converted into a testing facility within To Go, the logistics company that we were invested in. We've used vessels as places to quarantine returning OFWs. SM Prime was able to build quarantine centers fairly early on during the pandemic in support of national needs. I say it's not just money because we have assets that we can use. So we have sourcing arrangements to our retail business abroad, which enabled us to find medical supplies and PPEs and drugs and equipment, which we were then able to use our logistics arrangements to bring into the country and our footprint through our malls presence to distribute these. So we were able to distribute medical supplies and equipment so far to over 150 partner hospitals, agencies, and organizations. It's during times like this that this shared value, looking after all of your stakeholders component of sustainability has really come to the fore. And that's the way we're going to carry on operating. One final slide, which is we recognize that right now, at this time, MSMEs are so important in this country, both as employers, but also as a source of jobs and economic growth and development. And as I mentioned, we touch over 80,000 SMEs within the group. So we find it incumbent upon ourselves right now to really try and help them get through this. So in addition to the things we've been doing with our supplier relationships, our financing, and relief in our mall tenants, we launched a campaign, Kasama ng SM, which is really to try and promote awareness of Filipino producers, to give them marketing support. And in many cases, we're helping them to redefine the products that customers need right now, adapt to the new channels and convenience that's needed, and give them general business advice. So let me stop showing these slides and go back. Here we are. This is just one private sector group's response and how we're thinking about it. But I would say that during this whole period, it's a case of sustainability is critical. And we, along with others, have really tried to step up and live what we're saying. It's not a time to deprioritize it. It's a time to accelerate your commitment to sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for that opening statement. So right now, with the introductions and opening statements out of the way, let's proceed with the discussions. So to begin, I'm addressing this first question to Enrico. Sir, just want to cite the UN Global Compact, which is said to be the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative that started 2 decades ago. It calls for companies to, and I quote, first do business responsibly, and then pursue opportunities to solve societal challenges through business innovation and collaboration. That said, with the pandemic threatening the achievement of the SDGs, as well as having adverse impacts on firms and the economy in general, as well as in health, will it induce companies to dial down on sustainability practices, at least in the short term?
All right, thanks a lot for the question. And I think it goes along with some of the question I think coming from the floor on. So does it make business sense to invest on SDG or sustainable practices overall? And I think this goes is a sort of follow up on your question per se. So in fact, I mean, COVID-19 continues to challenge the economy, the infrastructure, the routines, and we have been all affected by that. But let's be reminded that. An economic model which is inclusive, equitable, and regenerative in its economic system is never been more important than today. A return to business as usual, honestly, is right now unimaginable, not only for those who are in the sector, but also for everybody that we been exposed to the challenge in the last 8 months. And when you have a situation in which you have basically a regression of human development, and when we're talking about in Asia of possible between 90 million to 400 million people that can actually slip back into a poverty, living less with $3.20 per day, the question is, for who are you doing business? And the time is right now to ramp up sustainable practices, sustainable business models, because companies can have several way forward in moving ahead in the challenge. We have just heard from colleagues on the panel that business can redeploy their unique capabilities to meet society immediate needs. And these acts normally are not forgotten by consumers because the recipients will build the goodwill, and they will have definitely a premium on those companies which have been moving forward in a sustainable path, moving ahead in the challenge of the COVID-19 and the recovery of it. Responsible firms will do everything possible to protect their people, managing the employees, customer, and supply chains, and promoting health and safety is a priority number one for most of the companies. We know that white government and most and they've been basically providing the first line of response to the emergency. It is also clear to us that government administer an emergency, and certain to the extent of wide public, at times we have the feeling that this has been delegated to the executive of the public sector. But probably it is in the private sector when the companies put together that actually there's a chance, the first spark of managing a response, it comes from what companies like the one we've been hearing today are putting together to move forward in the pandemic response. UNDP estimates that achieving the SDG in the Philippines could open 82 billion of market opportunities in food and agriculture, cities, energy and materials, and health, and can create 4.4 million new jobs by 2030. I think this makes a lot of business sense. Over.
Thank you for that, Enrico, for your response. Maybe the others would have something to add to that. Maybe Director Perlada.
Yes, I may.
Gonna-
Yes, thank
yeah.
you, Leo.
So since
Just-
I know that you're advocating also for sustainability for small businesses, so maybe you can provide a response from that perspective.
Well, actually,
After can you turn on your
the
camera?
global pandemic now
Sorry.
has
Your
really...
camera is off, but by the way. Right.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Actually, this global pandemic has actually provided that boost from redefining sustainability to what I would say is purpose. Companies, remember, as a marketing person, I know that you probably think that's very classic. No? But Peter Drucker said that there's one purpose for any organization or individual, and that is to be something to somebody, right? We cannot be everything to everybody, but we have to be something to somebody. Consumers are changing very much so, and companies are moving production to the pursuit of greater good, ethical values, and brand positioning. We all exist for the customer. And since our customers are changing, it will make sense for any business to be able to supply the needs and the requirements of the customer, the consumer. So companies are now moving towards a production of greater good through ethical values and brand positioning. Health and beauty and fashion brands, for example, are investing more in locally produced goods than ever before. Quality of life is coming into focus, and companies are keen to supporting local communities. In the short to the midterm, COVID is expected to realign consumers' priorities. I mean, for example, now, without the vaccine, your default position for immunity is basically your food and nutrition. So it really, you really have to adjust what the consumer needs are right now. In the case of home and technology, you're looking at reclassification of sustainability into what home and technology industries are actually looking like. It's really more for homestay, cocooning, staycationing, etc. And then services and payments are the same. You now have what you call high-tech, low-touch, and you have to be able to provide this to your consumer now. It's not just because of the requirement, it's really their mindset right now. So it really makes a lot of business sense already. And I think from the standpoint of trade, what's important for us and our exporters is really to embrace this. Because remember, these standards or even this kind of mindset is not just going to prevail in the Philippines, but globally, right? So companies from abroad will only buy your products if they will be able to introduce the same products in their domestic market. And if in their domestic market, the UN SDGs are part of what they are addressing or what they want to achieve, then all our exporters must also be able to do the same. So it makes a lot of business sense. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for that, Director. I just want to ask a follow-up question to that, because you mentioned that it makes business sense to pursue ESG, sustainability initiatives. From the perspective of MSMEs, won't that entail additional costs when you implement those initiatives? How do you balance that out with, catering to this objective and at the same time making sure that, companies don't fall under in terms of financials?
I think, again, the premise that we have that you are there to serve your customer, right? So no matter what you do, no matter what size you are, whether you're micro, you're small, you're medium or large enterprise, if you're guided by the fact that you are meeting the needs and wants of your customer, you should be able to do that. And you have to invest on that. Now, there might be tweaking that has to be done in terms of perhaps your supply chain, maybe getting help from bigger companies to be able to allow you, for example, in the case of exporters, to allow you to comply with whatever new standards are going to happen. But it has to be, those things have to be factored in. The only thing that I guess I can add to that is that for MSMEs is to realize to work together with a, shall we say, now the idea of community is very important. And that's why I consider our startups in the Philippines, they are really providing all of these ideas now And I'm so happy, for example, with being able to be part of the youth collab of UNDP, where you see a lot of people, not only from the Philippines, but ASEAN region and the Asian region, in the Asia in particular, finding solutions to pain points of products and services all over the world. And these are not big companies, right? So we have to be able to find a way for MSMEs to be part of the global value chain and contribute to that entire process. No, you probably have to supply, beginning with materials, and for you to be able to follow the standards, your bigger brother in the value chain will have to tell you how you will be able and assist you to make you meet the requirements for the raw materials that they need. Same principle as the circular economy for corporates and MSMEs playing and working together as big brother and small brother. And that's where even the DTI has this mentor me projects, for example, to be able to bring in our MSMEs into the bigger business fold.
All right. That's thank you for that, Director. That's good to hear. What about you, Tim? I suppose from the point of view of SMIC, since you're better positioned, I guess, to retain your sustainability practices or even expand it. If I remember it right, the capex is actually is around 94 billion to 98 billion pesos for this year, which is not far off from last year's 98 billion pesos. So again, maybe you can expound on that regarding sustainability.
Yes, well, I mean, you've asked it in terms of a cost or capex type question, but I think sustainability doesn't have to be purely about spending money. But on the cost side, this is a good use of your resources, and we are in a position to be able to do this. We're not under financial duress. In fact, the opposite. We're able to try and help people. But it's a good use of your money, because what you're really doing is you're preventing future costs. You're de-risking your own long-term survival as a company. It's not a short-term, long-term trade-off, really, if you take the perspective that what sustainability is, apart from being responsible and ethical, it's about actually guaranteeing your own survival for the very long term, because you're focusing on all those elements of the externalities of your business that need to be in place for your own survival. And if you take that view, then these are good costs, because what you're doing is, in our case, we're enabling our tenants to carry on operating in our malls. We're giving our customers ways to carry on dealing with us that reflects their new realities. We are working with the communities so that they support our own development and growth. And the capex that you mentioned, that's going to build facilities where 10% of that capex is being spent on disaster resilience features. But it only takes one serious disaster for that to pay out immediately. So I don't think there's a real cost trade-off between the short and the long term. But the other aspect for me is it's not just about spending money. It's about stepping back and saying, if we have responsibility to all these stakeholder groups, and we need them to thrive for us to thrive and grow, there's a mutual situation here, then how do we use what we've got on the ground in order to make that happen? And how do we use our expertise and our capabilities to give them a leg up as well? Because everybody needs to come through this together. And if we're in a position of relative safety to do it, then it's incredibly important right now for us to reach out and make sure we share that with everybody else.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that, Tim. So, judging from your responses, I guess it's safe to assume that everybody's on the same boat regarding survival and sustainability being not mutually exclusive. So, I guess that's safe to say regarding that one. Yeah. So, for the next question, well, again, prior to the pandemic, there seems to be this growing reception towards employing sustainability practices. I guess Director Perlada already mentioned a study by Euromonitor, wherein companies are still aware, included UN SDGs as among their priorities.
That's right.
Another survey is by PwC Philippines and the Management Association of the Philippines last year, where let me just cite some of the findings here. Around 80% of CEOs surveyed, they expect to change their production or service model in the next 3 years towards promoting more sustainable practices. But note that this was last year, before COVID-19. So do you think with the pandemic now, do you think this outlook has changed somehow due to the pandemic?
Yeah. Thanks, Leo. I think it has not changed. In fact, it has been reinforced. I think it's very clear that companies are seriously looking at this, and it's not just because you want to be, shall we say, go with the flow. It's really looking deeply at your customer, okay? Because there is a big reset also in terms of what I mentioned, in terms of consumer behavior and mindset, right? From sustainability, it's really purpose now. You're really examining yourself on what your role is in this society, right? And so for marketers, you have to be able to appeal to this kind of mindset of your consumers. And so rightfully pointed out by Tim, rather than look at the cost side, you're really looking at, basically your revenue and your volume side. Because the more that you're able to appeal and meet the pain points of your consumers and what appeals to them and what they like, because their mindset has changed, then it behooves you to change your production methods, because over the long term, you're not going to be able to survive. So as I said in my key takeaway, if you don't embrace this now, you're going to face extinction, I think. You're not going to be relevant, in other words, right? So with this kind of mindset prevailing globally, and thanks that there is some kind of anchor provided by the UN SDGs on this, I think companies will really need to seriously take a look at it. If not now, obviously they will be taking that direction. Because I know what you're asking. Like, for example, in the deliveries now, there's so much plastic, right? You order food and there's just plastic. There's some adjustment made. Some countries actually have suspended their requirements for single-use plastic, etc. But that's not going to be the default position, right? This is just responding to the actual need right now. But overall, post-pandemic, I think we will have to go back into that great reset and really go where our customers want us to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Maybe Enrico and Tim can add to that, or maybe you have other insights that you'd like to say.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree with the statement so far made. I think it's right now we are in a situation in which when you're talking about a great reset, basically it doesn't mean stop and rewind. It means reset. And by reset is basically moving forward with a new calibration of business. And I think this is the great opportunities which a lot of the small and medium enterprise have been taking on, also using the opportunities of an accelerated digital transformation. From our side, we see 6 entry points for achieving the SDGs. After the sit back, right? Of course, we see this strengthening human well-being and capabilities. If you don't invest on your people, it's very difficult to move forward on all indicators of the human development. We see the shift towards sustainable and just economies, which will be as inclusive as possible in sharing the gain of the bounce back of a growth. We see the building of a sustainable food system, and before you mentioned, we were mentioning about the importance of the of reconstructing the value chains, right? And I think that's where a lot of opportunity comes. And in this effort that we're doing in reinvesting and rethinking the way we do distribute wealth, I think it's where a lot of new ideas, innovation, and business actually can be created rather than disrupted. Achieving energy decarbonization and universal access to energy is vital, because without access to that, it would be very difficult to wire yourself into the gain of a possible recovery. And then the urban challenge that we see with the fast-growing urbanization, I think is going to be key moving forward. And overall, I think the premium that the customer and consumers are going to put on those companies which are keen on transforming and shifting the way they're approaching their way of doing business. I think it's going to be the key and the premium that is going to basically return on your investment moving forward.
Thank you, Enrico. How about you, Tim?
Yes, in addition to the customer perspective, I would just like to share a quick, feedback that we get from the financial community, the broad financial markets, because, as a listed company, we go out and I talk to shareholders around the world constantly. For the last few years, as we've adopted more and more sustainability and thought about how we can make a material difference and use things like sustainability development goals, we have attracted conversations with some of the best shareholders in the world, the long-term ones who are your partners who support you. And we've really had a lot of support, through the investment community around the world. Many of them say they look at us because now they understand how our business model works better because of our sustainable explanations and the things that we do. And during the period of COVID, we're spending a lot of money. It's obviously a difficult year financially. I've probably had conversations with somewhere between 600 and 700 investor conversations so far this year. With Zoom, it's suddenly a lot more easy than it used to be. So a lot of dialogues going on. Not a single one has said we're doing the wrong thing. So everybody is supportive that being responsible is the right thing for business. And our shareholder base, I think, is going to reward us for this in the long term.
All right. Thank you for that, Tim. Right. So I think let's move on to the next question, because this is referring to challenges. So I think we're 7 months in the lockdown. So I think we have a sufficient sample size for you guys to answer this next question. So what are some challenges that have emerged in the so-called new normal in terms of implementing or keeping up with sustainability practices? And how are these challenges being dealt with? Maybe anyone wants to take a stab at it?
I'll take it very quickly, Leo. While in the exporting sector, we have taken this into consideration, right? Of course, the timing now is such that it becomes more, shall we say, pronounced when countries now change their policies. Of course, it's all in favor of sustainability, but again, it's the preparedness that we have. So as I mentioned about non-tariff measures, I mean, it's no longer about tariffs now, it's about standards. Just to give you a quick example, I mean, China, for example, is requiring certification for frozen shrimp and frozen fish exports that they be COVID-free. And the first question is, do you even have facilities that will be able to make those specific tests for those particular products, right? So traceability is going to be another issue. The world would now like to be able to see where products are coming from, what materials they're made of, were they made in a sustainable manner, etc., etc. So you look, for example, at the requirements of the European Union when it comes to a lot of the products for those that are chemical-based or have chemical products, for agricultural products. You look at there, for example, the IUUs, the illegal, unreported, and unrestricted fishing, for example. Those are things that we, as exporters, have to consider, but they're all part and parcel of sustainability. Okay, now I think it's a bit of a difficult period, but over the long term, if you look at the long term, if you're going to be in that business, you have basically no choice. You are compelled to be able to answer and get all of those things considered in your production, in your supply. Especially to the global market, because their local market is going to be implementing those things, and they're not going to make any exception because you're an imported product. Okay, so if the whole world will actually go into this system, then I think it will make sense for everybody to really simply embrace it, use technology, particularly digital technology, in order to answer all of these global pain points.
Thank you for that, Senen. How about you guys? Anybody would like to answer that question regarding challenges?
I would just say it's been a very, very a period of having to be very practical and responsive. So, whole systems that were in place and views of how things were going to happen and what the priorities were, just got turned on their head pretty much overnight. And so in the initial stages, there's a lot of activity in just saying, how do we keep things running? And it's down to, we've got security guards who are living in buildings. How do we get them food and clothes and get their salaries to their families? How do we actually get our staff to the stores so that they can serve in the grocery stores that are still open? Really practical considerations suddenly became paramount. And we needed to be very innovative. Then it kind of evolved into, right, so we need to build new ways to meet the new normal for our customers. We need to think about new channels, new delivery mechanisms. Their product needs are changing, their habits are different. Let's adjust our business model. And as time goes on, again, it's another practical stage of, so what does this tell us for the long term, right? How much of this do we now incorporate within our ongoing business model? How do we use it to actually be more holistic and stronger going forward? And as you go through those different stages, which have been the different challenges, the kind of principles that have been in people's heads about sustainability have proven good guidelines. But it's been a period of real adaptation and flexibility, to keep everything as continuous as it can be.
Thanks, Tim. What about you, Enrico? Any feedback from your stakeholders about challenges and how these were being dealt with?
Yes. The crisis has been, it's quite interesting at times. We get also ourselves affectionate to some of the terminology when we describe this, right? So we look into the new normal, right? But there's nothing normal about the new way of living, and I think it has to be recognized as such, that we are trying, in fact, to disrupt the way we deal with the challenge, because the challenges which have been confronted to us, which were before already there and not felt in the immediate, because the sense of urgency of the personal safety was not immediately tackled. The climate change crisis or the climate emergency, as we were talking just at the beginning of the year, unless you feel it on the skin, you would not have reacted in the same way we have reacted later on to the COVID-19, because that impact immediately your own families and your own loved one personal security. Right. So I think the compound effect of the crisis, which layered on top of the previous one, has basically showed systemic challenges in societies. And I think we have two options there. One is as a government trying to address the issues of universal healthcare system, strengthening social protection, entering into scheme for cash transfer, food distribution for the especially most vulnerables. I think at the same time, and this is why I'm very happy to be part of this panel today, you see actually the practicality of the response, which have been igniting the combined effort of the private sector, which has been able to provide solution on the practical way to their employees, to their consumers, to their platform, basically, with their operating. And I think that the sum of the two would actually make the good story out of it. What is the real issue of the SDGs and the profitability of investing in that is we need situation, public space in which we are narrating and showing companies which have not yet embraced that is actually functioning and is actually a good model moving forward.
All right. Thank you guys for those wonderful insights. Maybe the next question I think we have to ask is regard to sustainability reporting, because I think, if anything, the COVID-19 has brought new questions that stakeholders would want answered. So I'm assuming the coronavirus is going to be with us for a while. So given that, are there some COVID-19 related information that maybe stakeholders would have to look to assess the effectiveness of how a company responds to the pandemic, or from the point of view of a macro perspective, the economy?
If I may jump in first on this one, and then of course colleagues. So at times I get a bit allergic on the overall concept of reporting, because there is, especially with the with the concept of data governance and the and the substitution of a synthetic way of representing emotions of what people are going through. What at times we are compound, or we find ourselves con, and is basically a production of reports which, unless understood from an empathic perspective, actually they do mean quite very little. So in terms of reporting figures, I would rather report stories or success, or the challenges and how these have been faced. So this is connected to the previous question. I think we need to increase the quality of the public space for us to be able to narrate what is functioning and what is working, and tell people stories rather than counting. Over.
All right. How about the others? Maybe.
Yeah, I'll pick up because
yeah.
We actually produce 8 sustainability reports every year here, and you're right. There's an absolute ton of work that goes into that. We're starting to think about it now for next year's reporting, for the 2020 reports, and it's much harder to produce a short report that's really what people want to know than it is, to produce something very large. It's very easy to produce a big report. I know as the years have gone on, we've realized this. Materiality is incredibly important to make your report something that's relevant and not just a lot of brochures that people read. And of course, this year, what's material has changed. And so that's going to have to reflect in the stories that we show and the kind of the data that we put in there. And I think when our stakeholders and the investment community and the sustainability agencies read our report, they're going to be looking for transparency from us and accountability for what we actually did. And on top of that, a real ability to assess the risks of the business and the opportunities is going to bubble up in the really good reports, because this is a period where everything is rethought, both for the short term and what it means for your business down the line. So the ability to really think materially, look at your risks and opportunities, and also to highlight how you're taking that thinking into your stakeholder groups as well. I think those are the things that are going to be different in people's expectations for sustainability reports, in the new year.
Yeah. Well, for me, maybe just to chime in there very quickly.
Sure.
I think we have to sort of, because of what has happened now, in fact, even emphasizes that we should stop bean counting and instead really looking at what the outcomes are. Okay, yeah. This pandemic is really going to cost us this great reset. So I think in terms of timetables and all of that, I think there is a lot of good reason why perhaps, and even before, we know already that some of the goals are really off track, and no less than Jeffrey Sachs, the president of SD Sustainable Development Solutions Network, has actually said that we're kind of in a suspended animation right now because we don't know much yet. We keep on talking about the next normal, and we don't even know that next normal yet. So the point is that if we're going in the right direction, I think that's healthy and good enough. And I don't think we should fault, shall we say, anybody really for not being able to meet, let's say, the SDGs over the given timeline of 2030 and all of that. Because of all of these challenges, the important thing, I think, is the outcome. And as Tim said, what is actually being achieved? Let's not get too focused and boxed in by the numbers. Okay, I know the targets. You don't change your targets. Every time something happens. But the point is, this is an extraordinary situation. So what we need to do really, I guess, is get everybody on the same page in terms of agreeing that these are really the things that we want to do as global goals, right? And really move forward, and let's see the outcomes that can be measured, perhaps not by the entire world, but one SDG at a time, or one country per SDG at a time is probably the way to approach it.
All right. Thank you for that, Director. So the reason I asked that question is given the context in the Philippines where regulators have just started mandating listed companies to submit sustainability reports. So it's very timely that on the year of the implementation, COVID-19 happened. So that's a question that I have to ask. Right. So we're in with the final question right now regarding this topic. So your answers to this question will serve as your closing statement. So here goes. So we all know that pretty much everybody has written off 2020 as a lost year in terms of growth, development, and financials and all that. But many are also expecting the global economy to recover in 2021. Now, assuming that to be the case, what role will sustainability play or sustainability practices play in fostering this recovery moving forward? And what pitfalls should governments and firms avoid in the future? Maybe let's start with Tim on that one.
We're in a period of having to be very adaptable, and that starts with looking at the needs of your customers, as has been said earlier, making sure that you're really looking after your employees, making sure that you're doing your best for the communities, and that you're working to try and repair and preserve the supply chains and the many business partners that you have. And all of this is happening in real time. And I think that's going to carry on being priorities through this cycle in ways that is going to help all of the stakeholders and the businesses in particular to keep operating and then to get back to new business growth. So, the principles of sustainability are really around long-term holistic thinking and being responsible. And if you apply those to the situations that you find yourself in with all of the difficulties now that things are broken, you'll come up with solutions which aren't just going to get you through the near term, but they're going to get you into a stronger long-term position. And I think you will be rewarded by your stakeholders for doing that. And I think you'll be rewarded by your shareholders for having built a stronger company and been responsible through this whole process.
Thanks, Tim. Your turn, Director.
Well, as a closing statement, I guess I'll again go back to my key takeaways that I said earlier. But I guess in addition to that, we should really look at purpose as the new normal, individually and collectively, as a nation and as a community of nations. So purpose is, I think, very important. And then, if we build back, and we have to build back better. Enrico is right. The reset is not, pause and going back to rewind and going back. It's really reset. So you have to examine really very deeply what your purpose is, what your real purpose is. As an individual, in fact, a consumer, all the way to the consumer, as a company. Then, of course, especially taking into consideration our MSMEs, we have to look at our supply chains and see how we can make everyone participate to have an inclusive, hopefully equitable and sustainable value chain that we can have. I think we have to promote value for all. In other words, we have our shared values, and I think we should promote them in order for us to move in the same direction, basically. The shift in social expectations, I think the pandemic has given us more mindfulness, being other-centered. Has given us an opportunity to be able to really look at ourselves and to look at others and how we should relate to one another. It has been there before, but again, just looking at what's happening in the world, climate change is really still here with us. As we speak, we still have all of these things happening. So we really have to pay attention to climate change and how it relates also to our SDGs. Then again, I'll always have to go back to purpose. Purpose has to go mainstream. Looking at and examining ourselves, taking advantage of this period of reset into what we really want to do and what we really are, and what we really hope for. So with that, I guess I'd say, if everyone embraces the SDGs, then let's just all move forward in achieving them to the extent possible in whatever way we can.
Thank you, Senen, for that closing statement. And finally, we have you, Enrico.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot also to colleagues today. I mean, it's been very enriching for me to hear everybody's perspective, and also for the questions. I mean, if I had a wish, right, on moving forward, I would really like to see a new social contract between the multilateral kind of support that, of course, we're offering, being the United Nations, but also a new social contract with wires in one system, civil society contribution, business, foundation, research communities, academia, local authorities, cities and governments. I think we need to be conscious of the fact that despite the role game we play in this society, we all have a role to play. We're all a node on ourselves, and the moment we wire with each other, I think we can resolve this together. There's no one single silver bullet for this. And when I was approaching to this kind of discussion today, I was asking myself, private sector. I don't see much private left in the private sector. Companies deals with the people at all level, resources. Some of them own, of course, but some of them are actually inserting a context of public goods. Moreover, today, the call for responsibility has to be public, and this is a perfect forum for that to share intent and common ambition. So we have the 2030 agenda, which at the moment is the best world society business strategy that we have at hand, and I'll end up quoting Nobel Prize Wangari Maathai that said that in the course of history there comes a time when humanity is called upon to shift on a new level of consciousness and to reach higher moral ground. So for C-suited everywhere and for all of us, I think, and I guess the time is now. Thank you.
You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you for that. Let me just repeat what I said. Thank you for that, Enrico. 2021 is going to be a very interesting year, given all things considered. So yeah, we'll see what happens regarding sustainability and growth and all that. So yeah, that's about it. That wraps it up for the first session of the sustainability series of BusinessWorld Insights. So I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in, as well as our panelists, Enrico, Senen, and Tim, for sharing their insights. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, for First Gen Corporation, Energy Development Corporation, and Merlaco, as well as our partners, the Bank Marketing Association of the Philippines, British Chamber of Commerce Philippines, the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, Management Association of the Philippines, and the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as our media partner, the Philippine Star, and our e-learning platform partner, Olern. And again, to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. There's going to be a recorded version of this to be uploaded later in case you missed some of the parts of the discussion and you want to revisit that part. So stay tuned. So you can catch the second session of BusinessWorld Insights Sustainability Series next week. That's going to be on Wednesday Wednesday on October 28th at 11 a.m. Philippine time. With the topic, Reducing Carbon Emissions for a Sustainable Future. So be sure to tune in to BusinessWorld's social media pages to be updated on our next projects. Again, this is Leo Uy, and this has been BusinessWorld Insights. Stay safe, guys.
better future is built by the brave, envisioned by brilliant minds, born from the passions of thousands strong. One that isn't without risk, but protected from it. Safe from all the worries and secure for what's to come. Because a better future with the greatest empires, the strongest communities, and the happiest families will always be worth having. That's why the bold and the fearless understand that recreating something better takes courage and strength. So together, let's start shaping a better future today. Recreate a braver tomorrow.